khí
cầu suốt đời về nước thừa tam thân xem
buồn đưa cánh tay ân cần từ bi nâng đỡ nguyện trong khi thiền tâm nguyện nhớ pháp đàm lỡ đỡ khi đi nấu cơm rửa bát nằm nội làm việc dẫn nhau kinh hành
trị niệm hợp danh tham hương lại bồn mỗi bước cho sẽ đem về an lạc mỗi nụ cười
sẽ tỏ chiếu
thời sống chánh niệm cho mỗi phút giây lại chỉ dạy cho người
thấy con đường thoát khổ
quyền thấy được tìm đồ dưới mọi bước chân mình
nguyện tim sung bản muốn trong mỗi khi hành sự
bước trên thở địa thở giữa chân không thăm lễ trí sáng diệu tâm mà vô mê quên sanh
thân tâm tịnh lạc tư tối thông dong đến
phước lâm chung lòng không luyện tiếng thần không đạo nương ý không hôn mê chánh niệm rõ ràng
tịnh lặng sáu căn
buông bỏ báo thân như vào thiền định nếu cần thọ sẽ kiết khác sẽ làm lại để tự đơn như lai tiếp theo
sự nghiệp cuộc đời
đưa mỗi loài về bế gian thành từ ba tha bốn tri sự giờ năm
năm sau thần thông hoa hiện
nhà vàng ơn thân có mừng một lần trong ba cõi ra vào tự tại qua độ mọi loài
không bỏ một ai tất cả đều đưa lên bờ không tối truyền
thế giới vô tận niệm và phiền não điều cô vô tận nguyện con cùng thế
sẽ là vô tâm
con nay xin lại bồ phát nguyện tu trì công đức chia sẻ với muôn loài hữu tình
để bao được trọn vẹn
muôn ơn và giáo hóa khắp nơi trong ba cõi
xin nguyện cùng tất cả
mọi loài chúng sanh hoàn thành tuệ giác. Kính mời đại chúng mời trang số 22. Please turn to page 22. Nguyện ngày an lành đem an lành ngày đêm sao thời điều an lành
trong mỗi giây mỗi phút
cầu ơn tăng bảo luôn che chở nam mô đa bồ tát tiêu ta gia kia xin nguyện
đoạn quả hùng sinh chân
Kính mời đại chúng cùng xả chân trước khi đứng dậy. Please release your legs before standing up. In gratitude to our parents that gives us life and our country that keeps us safe, we bow deeply to the three jewels in the 10 directions. Đệ tử chúng con nhớ cha mẹ sanh thành vững dân bảo hộ, cúi đầu kính lễ tang bảo thường trụ trong 10 phương. In gratitude to our teachers and friends that support us on the path, we bow deeply to the three jewels in the 10 directions. Đệ tử chúng con nhớ ơn sư trường giáo huấn luyện vị tinh thí đặng nam, cúi đầu kính lễ tang bảo thường trụ trong 10 phương. In gratitude to all the plants, animals, and mineral world, we bow deeply to the three jewels in the 10 directions. Đệ tử chúng con nhớ mọi loài chúng sanh cây cỏ đắng đa, cúi đầu kính lễ tang bảo thường trụ trong 10 phương. Kính mời đại chúng cùng an tọa. Please be seated. Nam mô Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Con kính bạch thầy, kính thưa đại chúng. Trước khi bắt đầu buổi chia sẻ bằng tiếng Anh, thì con cũng xin phép được thông báo những sinh hoạt trong vòng 2-3 tuần nữa. Thì ngày 20 từ ngày 27 tới 31 tháng 3 thì có khóa tu cho những em trẻ. Thì với các phụ huynh tuần đó thì chắc là lễ Spring Break, thì cái phụ huynh có thể khuyến khích mấy em lên chùa Tây Thiên để cùng tu tập. Và từng ngày 7 tới 11 tháng 5 tháng 4 thì có khóa tu người lớn. Thì quý vị Phật tử mà muốn dự khóa tu thì quý vị có thể xuống lầu đăng ký ở dưới bàn thư ký. Và năm nay thì coi lại danh sách thì khoảng 200 người, cho nên con cũng xin quý Phật tử mà có thể tình nguyện đi đón khách ngày 4, 5, 6, 7 Tây. Quý Phật tử có thể xuống bàn thư ký
để số phone, tên và xe bao nhiêu chỗ để con có thể sắp xếp đi đón khách. Gì đó. Kính cảm ơn đại chúng. Cảm ơn. So just a couple of announcements for the coming weeks. From March 27th to the 31st is our spring youth retreat. So if you are having spring break, you can come to our Westlock Meditation Center for our retreat. The following week after, April 7th to 11th, is the adult retreat in the Westlock as well. So I just shared if there's any volunteers who like to pick up guests from April 4th to the 7th, please come downstairs, your name, your phone number, and as well as how many spots is in your vehicle. And you can drive them to Trúc Lâm or to Westlock, whatever is convenient for you. Kính cảm ơn đại chúng. Mời đại chúng cùng chắp tay niệm Phật. Nam mô Bồ Ma Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Nam mô Bồ Ma Sư Mâu Ni Phật. Nam mô Bồ Ma Sư Dear Thai, dear community, today is March 12th, the year 2023, and we're here at the Trúc Lâm Monastery during our weekly Sunday session. How's everyone doing today? I know maybe some of you are a bit tired with the changing of the hour, 1 hour ahead, so you might be losing 1 hour of sleep. But it kind of signifies that we're almost ready for spring. The weather is warming up, and hopefully we can have a little bit more warmth than the past couple of weeks. Today, usually when we come up here for our sharings, the brothers, we have to come up with a topic, and we have to maybe sometimes it is close to like a celebration, like the Buddha's birthday or the Buddha's Enlightenment Day. But today I'd like to share a little bit about communication and how we project ourselves into the world. Usually we, as we wake up in the morning, our thoughts leads to our speech and our action, and how we communicate with one another can bring a lot of happiness or suffering, depending on the words we choose, depending on the state of mind we're in, and we project ourselves to our loved ones, our friends, our parents, and the way we communicate, the way we speak to them can affect the other person, but as well as yourself. So today I'd like to share a little bit about the art of communication. So it's a book by the Zen master, Tanyikhan, and I'd like to take a few points from that book, and you can find this book by yourselves if you want to read more about it. So when we're talking about communication, there's two aspects. There's the talking, the speech, but also the listening part. So before I share a little bit about it, I like to read the fourth training. So in Buddhism, we have the 5 mindfulness trainings. So today I'd like to read the 4th training out of the 5 trainings, and that is loving speech and deep listening. aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others. I'm committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and to promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I'm committed to speaking truthfully using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I'm determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I'm determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness. So in the fourth training is quite detailed, and it talks about how we should communicate with one another. Usually, sometimes out of our emotions, we react right away. When we're angry, our first thing is if we're arguing with someone, we want to keep arguing. We want to win the argument. And sometimes we don't take a step back and see maybe the words that we're saying can cause a lot of harm to another person. So the Zen Master, Tenyakan, shared that in the way we communicate with one another, there must be compassion. Whether you're speaking or whether you're listening, we always have to compassion. And compassion means to relieve the other person of their suffering. And when we talk about relieving of their suffering, you may not have to say anything at all. Maybe your friend just needs you to just be there so you can listen to them. And when we listen without prejudice. We listen sometimes we listen with our experience and we think that we can use the experience to help them. But sometimes we can just sit there and let them empty out their heart to you. And before you interrupt them, before you judge them or have any advice, you just have to sit there and listen to them. So the first thing, in order to listen to someone, in order to really help someone, you have to have compassion. And having compassion to someone is of course, needed. But here, the Zen Masters talked about self-compassion. So compassion for ourselves. Whenever we suffer, we know that we have to come back to ourselves. And we come back to ourselves by following our breath, our breathing. Our breathing is our true home. It's always there, but sometimes we forget about it. It's something that is automatic, but I think that it's something that we don't have to think about, but we're always breathing. But if we're so let's say in control of our breathing, I don't think we'd be living for too long. So our breathing is always there, and we always have to treat ourself as a home, as the Zen Master would say, a true home that we can take refuge in. And when we are stable in the way we interact with others, when we have emotions, we don't find different outlets to express that emotion, but we find healthier ways to deal with it. Instead of pushing it away, pushing our anger away, our negative emotions, we acknowledge these emotions that are rising in us. And then we kind of be its friend. We befriend this emotion. Instead of pushing it away, you're my enemy, we befriend this emotion. So it's always important that we have to be gentle with how we deal with our emotions. We don't want to be too extreme. And so earlier I talked about mindful listening. And sometimes when we talk to someone, it's not just verbal communication, but it's also the nonverbal communication, which is as important. And sometimes when we sit with someone, they're not able to convey everything they want to say. So they might convey it through their eyes, their body language. So that's why there's Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Wang Teyam Bodat. Wang is to reflect, and is a sound. And you reflect on the sound, deeply look at the sound. And when we listen deeply, it's almost like we're seeing that person deeply. But instead of seeing that person with our eyes, we see them with our ears. We listen to them deeply. So when we are with someone, we have to know that we have to be compassionate. We know that they have this Buddha nature. The Buddha means an awakened nature. And sometimes that Buddha nature lies very deep within them, and they're not able to uncover it. And they might need a friend, a teacher, to guide them to open up their Buddha nature. So here, when we are listening to someone, we can say to them, I am listening to this person with only one purpose, to give this person a chance to suffer less. So we would sit with that person, and we keep reminding ourselves that we're sitting with that person with the purpose of helping them suffer less. Instead of putting our own ideas, our own judgment, then we always remind ourselves that we're here for them. And I think that with mindful listening, we might have to ask ourselves in any relationship, whether it's with our loved ones, our siblings, our parents, do we understand them enough? Do we take the time to sit down and understand them? You might live with someone for many years, but you might not know a lot about them. They may live with you, but you don't understand them. So it's almost like when we're doing chanting, when we do the ma, the wooden fish, inviting the wooden fish and following the rhythm, there's this listening aspect to it. And many people might not know that, but you don't just invite them all randomly, but there's a rhythm, and you have to listen very carefully to the master who is leading the chant. You have to listen quite carefully, and sometimes the chanting might be the master might pick up the pace of the chant, might slow down. So you have to listen very skillfully, very deeply to adjust whoever's inviting the wooden fish to adjust the rhythm of the chanting. So the Zen master, just like I shared earlier about the fourth training, right speech. So what does that involve? As you know, that the right speech is one of the noble eightfold paths. So there's other ones, right mindfulness, right action, etc. But today we'll specifically talk about right speech. So in right speech, there's 4 elements. It must have these 4 elements in order to call it right speech. The first one is to speak the truth, not lying or turning the truth upside down or turning the truth in some way that is in your favor. And I'm not saying that be truthful like it takes, you have to be skillful in saying the truth. You can't just, maybe that person is, you don't want to be like too honest. You have to find the right time and right place to speak the truth. You don't want to speak the truth in a way that is nefarious and you want to hurt that person, so you speak the truth, even though it is the truth. But you have to find a place and time in order for them to really take the truth in. So being skillful in how we share the truth with someone. And sometimes Sometimes, if you're a parent, you're a teacher, sometimes the truth, when our parents tell us something, it might hurt. But from that hurt, you always have to remind yourself that we can see it in two ways. We can say that, oh, our parents are judging, telling us to do this and do that, but we're not, and we don't like it. Or you can see it another way, in that they're teaching us to become proper, adults as we, mature and grow up. That's why Tai always shares that if you have someone that is always, seeing your faults and trying to hopefully skillfully help you, that means that person is having attention onto you, is trying to help you. And sometimes when we talk about the truth, it could be just a portion of the truth, or it could be the truth that we think it is the truth. But it's always our own perception of what the truth really is. So trying to understand what the true truth is. So the first one is to tell the truth. The second one is to no exaggeration, so don't exaggerate. Something that is quite small, but we make it super big, make it out of proportions, and we think it's so important. So there's, if you know a snake has a forked tongue. We don't want to be like that person where you speak so loving to this person, but then behind their back you're saying something the total opposite. So that is speaking with a forked tongue. So not exaggerating. You don't want to make it a bigger deal than it really is, and trying to make that person, painting the other person in a bad light to gain favors for yourself. The third one is to be consistent. So this is similar, where no double talk or forked tongue, trying to gain advantage. It's important that we are true to our word when we're honest with someone, that we're really there and we're trying to speak honestly to that person. And we're not changing the context or the situation in order to please us. And the fourth one is to use peaceful language, not to use insulting, violent words, cruel speech, verbal abuse. And this is quite important, I think. Sometimes when someone talks to us in a certain tone, it's not the what they're saying, but the how they're saying it. That's why whenever let's say you want to ask your parents for something, well, what do? You wait till they're happy, not when they're angry or so you wait for that right opportunity to ask them. Here, like I shared, the how is important, the way we are talking to each other. So that's the 4 elements of right speech. And this is the 4 criteria of loving speech. So during the Buddha's time, there was a lot of people who misunderstood the Buddha's teachings. So the Buddha shared these 4 criteria in order to differentiate what is right and what is wrong. So right speech. So first one is speaking the language of the world. So the way you use your speech in a crowd of, let's say, kids and adults is quite different. The way you share things is different. Whether the way you talk to your friends, the way you talk to your co-workers is different. This is important because we have to differentiate the audience or the person that you're speaking to. If we're at let's say if you're at a medical conference and they're using a lot of medical technical jargon, then of course that is suitable for that environment. But you can't, say the same thing at a temple or something like that. So it always has to fit the situation and environment. The second is to speak according to the understanding of the person listening. So every person you encounter has different experiences. So one thing that you teach someone else might not be suitable for even though they might be suffering the same thing, it might not be suitable for the other person. So when you talk to someone, you have to understand who are you speaking to and what kind of situation they're in. In a book, it talks about the story of a woman who a man gave this woman a bowl of milk, and just to keep for the day. And the man returned in the evening to retrieve the bowl of milk. But the bowl of milk had turned to butter and cheese. And so the woman explained to him that, even though it's not the same, it's also not that different. And I share this because sometimes the person you're talking to, the experiences changes. So even if you're sitting here and I look at you, even 1 hour, maybe an hour after, your experience has changed and I have to adapt to how you are at. So the second one is speaking according to the understanding of the person listening. The third one is prescribing the right medicine for the sick. And when I talk about sick, it's if you're having suffering, aside from physical ailments that you might have, you go to a doctor. But there's just the sickness of the mind or mental health. And you have to find the right medicine in order to help you. If let's say, if you have a lot of cravings or attachment, the Buddha advised us to teach, the remedy for that is to practice offering. So administrating the right medicine for the right person is important. When we're talking about to children, for example, and adults, let's say if you're talking to like a sensitive subject, such as the passing of someone that you love, the way you explain to the child is very different from the way you explain to an adult. So this is why during the Buddha's time, they said that there was a man who came to the Buddha and asked him so many questions about a certain teaching. And he wanted the advice from the Buddha. And during the whole time, the Buddha was just silent. He didn't say much. And Ananda asked the Buddha, after the man left, how come you didn't reply to him? And the Buddha said that it wasn't the right, almost like not the right medicine or the right time to share the advice, because this man came here with the intention to debate, to have like a debate with the Buddha. And the Buddha said that wasn't the right medicine for him. Maybe another time when he is truly suffering, then he can come to the Buddha for the right advice. And the fourth one is to reflect on the absolute truth, being skillful in revealing truths about making people, without making people get confused, and finding humble and skillful means to uncover the truth. And the best way to, let's say if you're helping someone, it's almost like the example, they always say like when you point to the moon, don't fixate on the finger pointing to the moon, but you just focus onto the moon. The finger is there just to guide you. So we know that the moon, let's say the moon is like the absolute truth of a teaching of something. And that finger is like Tai, trying to teach you something, to look at the moon. But don't get so fixated that you're mistaking the finger for the moon. So here it's trying to say that we have teachers, we have parents that kind of guide us. They won't be able to hold your hand for your whole life. You have to take steps to really understand the teachings, and you have to put them into practice in order to really understand them. So that is the 4 criteria of speech. And I'd like to leave with you some quotes from Zen Master in his book. Our communication is what we put out into the world and what remains after we have left it. So here, I think the way we live is important. The way we project ourselves into the world using our speech and action. Really, after, let's say, you passed, is what remains, your speech and your actions. People remember you for what you say and what you have done. Even though if your physical body is not here, here in this line saying that your speech and action is always there, even if your physical body is not. And another one is everything we do and say bears our signature. So we know that if we have any documents, any important documents, we always have to sign it off. And the way we speak, the way we act is kind of like that, is our signature for who we are as a person. So today I'd like to share with you the importance of communication, the way we speak to the people in our lives, the people at our workplace, school. We have to have a little bit of compassion in the way we speak. Before we say something, always reflect, do these words help someone or do they harm someone? So with that, I'd like to finish our short sharing for today, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Kính cảm ơn đại chúng xả chân trước khi bắt đầu cúng đình. Di Đà Phật.